Hello to all of my wonderful subscribers. I have an interesting video to present today. In this video, I'm going to begin in 1968 and go all the way back to 1896. And we're going to start from there, but our midpoint is 1968, where I began. And then we're going to go all the way out from 1968 to 2040. And in between those two timelines, starting from 1968 going backwards, we're going to be going 9 years, 9 years, 9 years. And the video that I'm making was actually inspired by the Beatles with their Revolution Number 9 song. And so this should be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to begin in 1896 at the first modern Olympic Games in Athens. The interesting thing about Athens and the Olympic Games is that it was another 108 years in between the first modern Olympic Games in Athens to the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, the 2 years that they were held in Athens, the two occasions. The other interesting thing that happened, which was quite major, in 1896 is the San Rico earthquake, which destroyed about 9,000 homes and caused at least 22,000 deaths. We skip over another 9 years and we land in 1905, which is Bloody Sunday, first Russian Revolution, which occurred on 22nd of January 1905, which was an uprising that was instrumental in convincing Tsar Nicholas II to attempt the transformation of the Russian government from an autocracy into a constitutional monarchy. And we all know how that went down. And in 1905, the same year, on May 10th, the Oklahoma Territory was struck by one of the worst natural disasters in early American history. 100 years later, this single tornado remains the second most deadly, at least in Oklahoma City, and ranks among the 20 most deadly tornadoes in United States history. So obviously this article that I've taken this from was written in 2005, but nonetheless it's still relevant and probably is, maybe, unless I've missed something, the most deadly of Oklahoma. Okay, so another 9 years after that, after 1905, brings us to 1914, which is the first year of the First World War, and it also includes the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. We'll skip another 9 years, and we land in 1923. And in 1923, on June 16, the Bolshevik Revolution ended. The Russian Revolution was a period of political and social revolution that took place in the former Russian Empire. And again, we all know what happened. We also had in that year, 1923, the Great Kanto earthquake. And that was on September 1st, 1923. If we skip another 9 years, I'm kind of just breezing through this because I have a lot of other details in here, but it would just add too many elements. I'm actually putting this colourful chart together, trying to look at the patterning, make it colourful and see how it all looks at the end. I might include that in this video if I actually finish it at some point, because it's taking me a long time to do that chart. So yeah, we were at 1923, so now we skip to 1932, which is a massive famine in USSR, with estimates of 5 million deaths caused by starvation. And following the Wall Street crash, 25,000 banks in the US fail. On the 23rd of September, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is founded. The Middle Eastern country was created by merging the kingdoms of Hejaz and, I can't pronounce half of these words, but the King of the House of Sword. The day is celebrated as Saudi National Day in the kingdom. And then we go another 9 years, and that brings us to 1941. And we had, in 1941, on 18th to 19th of September, the Earth experienced a great magnetic storm, one of the most intense ever recorded, which was also a prediction that Archaics made for 2023. And we have not seen the year out yet, so we just have to wait and see if anything does happen. Also, we had the Pearl Harbor bombing on December 7th of 1941. There was a earthquake, the Chengpu earthquake in 1941, which was a magnitude of 7.1 on December 17. And that one claimed 358 lives. This is the next element here is Operation Spark, which brings in a whole new element. And this was, it was sometimes translated as Operation Flash. It was the code name for the planned rubbing out of Mr. How do I put this without bringing too much attention to the channel? Adolf Hitler. It was the whole operation to get rid of him. Anyway, so the next year we land at after we skip 9 years is the 1950, the Korean War, which began on June 25 when the Northern Korean People's Army invaded South Korea. On January 27, which is earlier than June, these aren't in order, they're just in the years, Klaus Fuchs confesses that he gave atomic secrets to the Soviets while working at the Manhattan Project. And January 31, President Truman announces the decision to proceed with development of the hydrogen bomb. So these are all pretty major events that have happened every 9 years. So the next 9 years we move forward, and that brings us to 1959. This is where NASA starts to become a yearly or very prominent within the lives of the collective. So on April 9th, 1959, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration introduces America's first astronauts to the press. And this is also the year that a chartered plane transporting musicians Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper with the pilot Roger Peterson goes down in foggy conditions near a lake, near Lake Iowa, killing all four on board. And the tragedy is later termed The Day the Music Died, popularised in Don McLean's 1971 song American Pie. And it also, that year in 1959, was the end of the Cuban Revolution. Okay, so we go forward another 9 years, and this is where I started in 1968. Based on my inspiration was Revolution 9, which is a sound collage from the Beatles' 1968 self-titled double album, also known as the White Album. And, of course, in 1968, on June the 5th, shortly after midnight, Robert F. Kennedy was shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Also, on April 4th of that year, 1968, was when Martin Luther King was killed. And that year as well, in 1968, NASA was a huge year. It was the first crewed Apollo missions. And the narrative, of course, was ready to, the ball was rolling. Okay, so as I said, 1968 was where I started, and I went backwards first, and I found all these things quite interesting, that all these major events had happened every 9 years. And so I decided to keep going, and add another 9 years onto 1968, and that brings us to 1977. And that year was on January 8th, 1977, the Moscow bombings were a series of 3 terrorist bombings in Moscow. The attacks killed 7 people and seriously injured 37 others. Here we have NASA again, which launched in 1977 NASA's Twin Voyager spacecraft, which inspired the world with pioneering visits to Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Their journey continues 45 years later as both probes explore interstellar space, the region outside the protective heliosphere created by our sun. You know, it is the narrative, and a lot of people believe it. And in 1997, the same year, March 27, was the Tenerife airport disaster, when 2 Boeing 747 passenger jets collided on the runway at Los Rodeos Airport on the Spanish island of Tenerife. The collision occurred when KLM Flight 4805 initiated its takeoff run, while Pan Am Flight 1736 was still on the runway. 583 people died. And of course, Jimmy Carter is sworn in as the 39th President of the United States, and he pardoned Vietnam War draft evaders. Okay, so that was 1977. So we had another 9 years, and we end up at 1986. Now that year, we had the Soviet nuclear reactor at Chernobyl, which exploded on April 26, causing the release of radioactive material across much of Europe. And in 1986, on January 29, we have NASA back in this 9 year. They just keep showing up, NASA, every 9 years. And of course, there's things in between, but it's just interesting to see that they keep landing. They're just there all the time. January 29, Space Shuttle Challenger explodes 73 seconds after it lifted off from Cape Canaveral. All 7 crew members were killed. And, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories about that one too. And we had the Damascus bombings, which were a series of terrorist attacks perpetrated in Damascus, Syria in 1986. They were the deadliest acts of terrorism against civilians since the quelling of the Islamist uprising in Syria. And you can probably hear my kids in the background. I apologise for that, but this is just how it is here, and that's why it takes me so long to make videos. And so we jump forward another 9 years. It's 1995, which was the intentional rubbing out of Yitzhak Rabin, the 5th Prime Minister of Israel, which took place on the 4th of November 1995. The Oklahoma City bombing, the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, was the deadliest act of homegrown terrorism in US history, resulting in the deaths of 168 people. A day after the bombing, the FBI released a sketch of a suspect who rented a Ryder truck in Kansas. That suspect was Timothy McVeigh. And we also had the Great Hanshin earthquake in 1995 on January 17. And, of course, NASA's shuttle missions. They had multiple missions. Okay, so jump forward another 9 years, and that brings us to 2004, where Facebook, originally called The Facebook, is launched by Mark Zuckerberg. In 2004, there's a transit of Venus, the first such occurrence since 1882. NASA lands on the Opportunity rover on Mars. Part of the narrative. We have the Sumatra earthquake, which was the first in a series of massive earthquakes to shake the globe. A magnitude of 9.1 is among the 3 largest earthquakes ever recorded since instrumental recordings began at the turn of the 20th century. The 2004 Summer Olympics are held in Athens, which, as I said in the beginning, was 108 years since 1896. And we also had the Al-Qaeda bombs multiple trains in Madrid, killing 193 people. So, yeah, I mean, these are all really major events that have happened every 9 years from 1896. So from 2004, we jump forward another 9 years, and we have where we land in 2013, the sarin gas attacks against citizens of Syria, and April 15th, the Boston Marathon bombing. So we jump forward from 2013, another 9 years, and NASA claims that this year, 2002, will go down in history books as one of the most accomplished years across all of NASA's missions. And we also have the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that's where our timeline ends, and we're now in 2023. But because of some of the things that I looked at going back and forward, 2023, there's a few things that haven't happened that could very much well still happen. And we also had in 2022 the death of Queen Elizabeth, the longest-serving British monarch, which was a prediction made by Archaics. Door slams. Anyway, so yeah, 2023 is where we are now. And looking at some of the things I found, there is still time for some major events to happen. One of them being a intentional removal of somebody on the world stage. There's still time for something like that to happen, or a massive geomagnetic storm, CME, big major blackout. It's still on the cards. But anyway, so if we jump from 2023, another 9 years, that brings us to 2031. And although I won't make any predictions, I do think it's pretty fair to say that 2031 is going to be a very interesting year, and I think something pretty huge is going to happen in 2031. But it's probably going to be very different to what we've seen due to the way that things are going in the world. I think something really out of this world is going to happen. And, of course, then you add another 9 years and we end up at 2040. So, yeah, jumping forward by 9 years from 1896 all the way to 2040, it's 144 years, which is 72 years either side of 1968. So, yeah, I found that quite interesting. Okay, that's it for me with this one. So thank you for watching, and catch you all next time. See ya.